I never thought I'd tell this story. It's something I promised myself would stay with me till the day I die. But the guilt has become unbearable, especially when I see my best friend smile at her husband. She can never know what happened, what her husband and I did on her wedding day. It would destroy her. Yet, I need to share this, to lighten the weight pressing on my heart. My name is Blessing, and this is a story that will make you think twice about love and marriage. Not because marriage isn't beautiful, sometimes it is. But what happens when it's built on lies and betrayal? The deception is enough to drive anyone mad. I've spoken to therapists, and they all say the same thing: a man can love you and still cheat on you. I think of my best friend, Beatrice, hugging her husband, telling him how much she loves him. I remember that he told me the same words on her wedding day. He's probably saying them to other women too. Beatrice and I have known each other our entire lives. We're closer than most sisters. We've been through everything together: school, first loves, heartbreaks, all of it. So, you see why I could never tell her? Why it tears me apart when she speaks about her husband with such love. We used to share everything. She was my safe place. I remember when she lost her virginity, she told me how underwhelming it was. We laughed about it then. Looking back, I should have been more cautious. Beatrice and I have always been in sync, sharing everything from favorite books to bad relationships. But the day I met her husband-to-be, everything changed. That night marked the beginning of a secret that would eventually break me. It all started on Beatrice's 30th birthday. We were out at a club, celebrating like we always did. She was busy having fun, and I was left on my own, watching her dance. That's when Mark walked up to me. He was tall, handsome, with a trimmed beard and striking blue eyes. He made a comment about Beatrice's smile, and from there, we struck up a conversation. We talked, drank, and kept talking. Before I knew it, I was drawn to him, more than I should have been. Beatrice left with someone else that night, so Mark and I ended up going to his place. I was drunk, but I remember it all. The chemistry between us was undeniable. That night, Mark took me in a way no one else ever had. It felt intimate, exciting, and wrong. Over the next few weeks, we kept seeing each other. We had a lot of sex, drinks, and long talks. I knew I should have told Beatrice, but I didn't. It felt like a fling, and I didn't want to mess things up if it never got serious. Plus, Mark never defined what we were doing, so I tried to keep it casual, telling myself it wasn't a big deal. But deep down, I knew it was. At the same time, Beatrice was seeing someone too. She would talk about her mystery man, going on dates and staying over at his place. I didn't think much of it, until one day, she decided to introduce him to me. I was excited to finally meet the guy who'd captured my best friend's heart. I even cooked for them. When Beatrice pulled up to our apartment with her mystery man, my world shattered. It was Mark. The same Mark I had been sleeping with for weeks. My heart stopped when I saw him get out of the car. He acted like we were meeting for the first time. I felt sick, but I couldn't show it. Beatrice was so happy, and I didn't want to ruin it. That night, I had to sit and watch them, pretending everything was fine. Beatrice was all over him, and Mark played along like nothing had ever happened between us. It was surreal. Even worse, they went upstairs after dinner, and I could hear them having sex. The moans, the laughter, it was unbearable. At that moment, I knew I was in over my head, but I still couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth. Things only got worse from there. Mark became a regular at our apartment, and every time he stayed over, I had to listen to them together. But it didn't stop there. After Beatrice had fallen asleep, Mark would sneak into my room. The first time, I resisted. I even threatened to tell her. But the second time, I gave in. I was so conflicted, angry at myself, angry at Mark, but also drawn to him in ways I couldn't explain. We ended up in this twisted affair, under the same roof as my best friend. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't stop. At first, I convinced myself it was just fun. Beatrice was happy, Mark was with her, and I could live with my secret. But everything changed the day Mark proposed. I'll never forget how Beatrice came home, breathless, waving her engagement ring around like it was the best day of her life. Mark proposed. She squealed. I forced myself to smile, even though my heart was breaking. We went out that night to celebrate. Beatrice was over the moon, showing off her ring to anyone who'd listen. Meanwhile, I was dying inside. How could I tell her what Mark and I had done? How could I ruin her happiness? I kept quiet, pretending to be the supportive friend, but I knew the truth would destroy everything. In the days leading up to the wedding, my anxiety was at an all-time high. I was the chief bridesmaid, so I had to be around Beatrice constantly, helping her plan the perfect day. But inside, I was crumbling. Mark started distancing himself from me after the proposal. I guess he didn't want to risk me saying something. We barely spoke, and when we did, it was awkward. I had so many questions for him, but he avoided me at all costs. The wedding day finally arrived. I spent the entire morning with Beatrice, making sure she looked perfect. We laughed, we cried, and I tried my hardest to be there for her. But inside, I was a mess. I excused myself to get dressed, and that's when it happened. Mark walked into my dressing room. I was standing in front of the mirror, trying to hold it together, when I saw him in the reflection. He had that same smug look on his face, like he knew he could get away with anything. I was furious. I wanted to scream at him, to throw something, to make him leave. But I didn't. I couldn't. We ended up kissing, and one thing led to another. Before I could stop him, he had me cornered, and we were having sex, on Beatrice's wedding day. It was quick, heated, and felt like a horrible mistake. And then, the door swung open. Beatrice's younger sister walked in and saw everything. I froze. Mark froze. She was stunned, staring at us, not saying a word. Then she turned and left, leaving the door wide open. I was horrified. How could I let this happen? How could I be this person? The guilt consumed me, but somehow, I made it through the rest of the day. Mark acted like nothing happened. He stood there at the altar, exchanging vows with Beatrice, while I could barely look at either of them. The wedding day was a blur. After what happened in my dressing room, I was on autopilot, going through the motions. Beatrice looked stunning in her dress, glowing with happiness. Mark, standing beside her, played the perfect groom, while I stood there feeling like the worst kind of person. I remember barely being able to look at him as they exchanged vows. Every word they said to each other felt like a knife twisting in my gut. When the ceremony ended, I slipped away as quickly as I could. I avoided everyone, especially Beatrice's younger sister. I wasn't sure if she would tell Beatrice what she saw or if she would stay quiet for her sake. Either way, I knew I couldn't stay around much longer. The guilt was suffocating. After the wedding, I kept my distance. I moved out of the apartment Beatrice and I shared and sold my part of our business to focus on something new. Beatrice didn't understand why I left so suddenly, and I made up some excuse about wanting a change. But the truth was, I couldn't stand being near her anymore. Every time I saw her with Mark, it reminded me of what I'd done, what we were both hiding from her. Beatrice's younger sister didn't confront me directly, but I knew she hadn't forgotten. She was distant, cold whenever we were around each other. I avoided family gatherings and any events where I knew I'd run into them. Beatrice kept trying to reach out, confused by my sudden disappearance from her life. But I was too ashamed to face her. Months passed, and I watched from afar as Beatrice's life with Mark seemed to blossom. On social media, they looked like the perfect couple. She posted photos of them traveling, going on dates, smiling like everything was perfect. It broke my heart. How could Mark stand there, smiling in those photos, knowing what we'd done? How could he keep lying to her, the same way I was lying by keeping my silence? But the worst part was that even though I hated him for what he did, I couldn't completely let him go. There were times, dark moments, when I'd find myself thinking about him, craving him, as sick as that sounds. He would reach out occasionally, and every time I told myself I would say no. But I never did. It was like I was trapped in this vicious cycle, unable to break free. I was ashamed of myself. Beatrice was my best friend, practically my sister, and here I was still tangled up with the man who had ruined everything. I had let him destroy not only her happiness but my own integrity. Even now, as I tell this story, I know how twisted it sounds, how unforgivable my actions were. But the truth is, I was weak, and Mark knew how to manipulate that weakness. He was like an addiction I couldn't quit. The final straw came when Beatrice announced she was pregnant. I found out through a mutual friend, not from Beatrice herself, since we hadn't been speaking much. When I saw the announcement, I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. Mark was going to be a father. Beatrice was going to be a mother. They were starting a family, and I was left on the sidelines, knowing the truth about the man she was building her life with. I had always thought the guilt would fade with time, that I could somehow live with what I'd done. But seeing her pregnant, seeing how happy she was, I realized it wasn't going to go away. The weight of my betrayal was getting heavier by the day. And the worst part? Mark hadn't changed. I knew he hadn't because even after Beatrice's pregnancy, he still came to me. He showed up one night, out of the blue. It was raining, and I had just gotten home from work when I heard the knock on my door. I knew who it was before I even opened it. There was Mark, drenched from the rain, standing on my doorstep with that same arrogant smirk he always had. "I shouldn't be here," he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. He was right. He shouldn't have been there, and I should have told him to leave. But I didn't. We ended up in bed again, like we always did. And the worst part was that I hated myself for wanting him there. It was like a part of me was addicted to the toxicity of it all. I was trapped, and I didn't know how to break free. The next morning, I lay there in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to Mark get dressed. I knew then that this had to end. I couldn't keep doing this, not to Beatrice, not to myself. Mark left without a word, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel anything. No guilt, no shame, just emptiness. That same day, I made the decision to cut him out of my life for good. I changed my number, blocked him on every platform, and stopped answering any calls that I didn't recognize. I couldn't risk him pulling me back into the mess I had created. But the damage was already done. Beatrice was happy, or at least she thought she was. And I was left with the weight of what I had done, knowing that one day, it could all come crashing down if she ever found out. But that's not even the worst of it. Despite all of this, despite knowing everything, Mark is in my bed again tonight, as I write this. I'm fully aware of how wrong it is, but I can't seem to escape this mess. He's an evil I can't shake, and I don't know if I'll ever be free of him. I know what you're thinking. How can I keep living like this? How can I let this man, who has destroyed so much, still be a part of my life? The truth is, I ask myself the same thing every day. I know I should have told Beatrice a long time ago, but now it's too late. She's married to him. She's pregnant. How could I possibly rip her world apart by telling her the truth now? But I also know that keeping this secret is slowly destroying me. I've distanced myself from Beatrice, from the life we once shared, because I can't look her in the eye without feeling sick. Her younger sister knows, and maybe one day she'll tell Beatrice everything. But I won't. I can't. Mark continues to haunt my life, even though I've tried to cut him off. Every time I think I'm free, he finds a way back in. He's a poison I can't seem to flush out of my system. But I know I need to, for my own sanity. This situation is unsustainable. I can't keep pretending that everything's fine while living with this much guilt. I often wonder what would happen if Beatrice found out. Would she forgive me? Could she ever trust me again? Probably not. And I wouldn't blame her. What I did was unforgivable. But at the same time, part of me thinks she deserves to know the truth about the man she married. The man she's building a life with. For now, I'm stuck in this limbo, unable to move forward and too scared to confess. I know things will catch up with me eventually, but until then, I'll continue living with this secret, hoping that one day I'll find the strength to finally let it all go. If you found this story compelling, check out more real-life stories of betrayal and heartbreak on my YouTube channel. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content that gets to the heart of what really matters in life.